Love blooms in the most unexpected places. This captivating tale of survival and romance will have you on the edge of your seat as two strangers find solace and connection in the heart of a deserted island. But beware, this story might just have a shocking twist.
The sky had darkened to a bruised purple as thunder rumbled low, a deep warning that the sea was turning hostile. Ifeanania Eziani clung tightly to the railing of the sleek yacht, her heart pounding in sync with the crashing waves that pelted the deck like cold stones. The luxury of the trip, the laughter, the champagne, the endless horizon, was swallowed whole by the sudden storm. She barely had time to think as a fierce gust tore through the sails. The yacht pitched violently, its polished wood creaking under the strain. Park Miho, a man she had only met hours before, shouted above the roar, his voice steady but urgent, "Ifeanania, hold on." But the storm was merciless. A towering wave crashed over the bow, swallowing the deck in icy water. The yacht tilted sharply to starboard, groaning like a wounded beast, before capsizing with a deafening crack. Ifeanania was thrown into the churning chaos, swallowed by the cold embrace of the ocean. Panic clawed at her throat as saltwater stung her eyes and her lungs begged for air. She fought instinctively, kicking and thrashing until she broke the surface, gasping for breath. Through the sheets of rain and whipping spray, she caught sight of a silhouette battling the waves, a man, swimming with relentless determination toward a distant shape, a small, rocky island barely visible against the storm's fury. Exhaustion weighed on her limbs, but the thought of drowning ignited a fierce spark within her. With trembling arms, Ifeanania pushed toward the island, the jagged rocks cutting into her palms as she finally dragged herself onto the shore. Her body trembled, her clothes soaked and torn, eyes wide and wild with fear. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time had lost all meaning before she heard footsteps behind her. Turning slowly, she saw him, Miho, hair plastered to his forehead, eyes dark with worry yet bright with relief. Without a word, he knelt beside her, offering his hand. "We're alive," he said softly. "We'll figure this out. Together." Ifeanania swallowed her fear and took his hand. As the storm began to relent, leaving a sky washed clear with the pale light of dawn, a fragile hope began to bloom amidst the wreckage. The island awoke slowly, bathed in soft golden light, the storm's fury reduced to distant whispers. Ifeanania sat on a smooth stone, her gaze fixed on the endless ocean that had both betrayed and spared her. Around her, palm trees swayed gently, their leaves whispering promises of shelter and life. Beside her, Miho moved with practiced ease, gathering driftwood and searching the underbrush. His hands, roughened by years at sea, were steady and sure, a stark contrast to Ifeanania's own trembling fingers. Despite the overwhelming uncertainty, Ifeanania felt a quiet calm in her chest, a deep well of faith she often drew from in difficult moments. Closing her eyes, she murmured a prayer. Not just for safety, but for strength, for wisdom, and for courage to face whatever lay ahead. Her faith had been her anchor through storms far less physical, losses, doubts, and fears she'd battled silently before. Now, standing on this remote island with Miho, it became a beacon in the vast unknown. Miho glanced over at her, his brow furrowed with curiosity. "You pray?" he asked, voice low but genuine. Ifeanania nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "It's what keeps me grounded when everything feels like it's falling apart." He studied her for a moment, then nodded, a newfound respect flickering in his eyes. "I'm Miho," he said, extending a hand. "Ifeanania," she replied, shaking it firmly. The uneasy silence that had hung between them since the shipwreck began to ease. Slowly, they fell into a cautious truce, two strangers thrown together by fate, bound by survival. Together, they set to work. Iphigenia watched as Miho expertly crafted a crude shelter from fallen branches and palm fronds. She helped gather fruit and fresh water, learning from his knowledge of the sea and land. There was no room for pride here, only trust. And little by little, it grew. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Iphigenia found herself sharing a quiet moment with Miho. She told him about her family back home, the faith that shaped her every step, and the hope she clung to even in the darkest times. Miho listened without interruption, his usual guarded expression softening. "I've been at sea most of my life," he said quietly. "Lost people too. But I never thought I'd be grateful to find someone like you. Here." Iphigenia's heart fluttered unexpectedly, warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the tropical sun. In this place of desolation, amid uncertainty and challenge, they discovered something rare, a strength born from trust, a comfort in shared struggle, and the first fragile roots of connection. The island, with its vibrant greenery and endless blue skies, felt like a world untouched by time. Each morning, sunlight filtered through the thick canopy, casting dappled patterns on the soft sand beneath their feet. Exotic birds called overhead, their melodies weaving through the salty breeze like a secret song. Iphigenia found herself marveling at the island's hidden wonders, the way bright orchids clung to ancient trees, how colorful butterflies danced around wildflowers, and the gentle ripple of a freshwater stream hidden among the rocks. It was as if nature itself was inviting them to pause, breathe, and live fully in this strange new world. Miho was no stranger to the island's moods. He moved with the confidence of a man who had faced the ocean's fiercest tempests and the jungle's quiet dangers alike. Yet around Iphigenia, his usual reserve softened, replaced by occasional laughter and easy smiles. Their days settled into a rhythm. Mornings spent gathering food and repairing their shelter. Afternoons shaded beneath palms, sharing stories or watching the waves break on the shore. Nights warmed by a fire, the sky above a blanket of shimmering stars. In these quiet moments, the walls between them began to crumble. A glance lingered longer than before. A smile held a secret promise. Unspoken feelings bloomed, fragile but undeniable. One afternoon, as Iphigenia balanced carefully along a narrow rock ledge to gather coconuts, Miho called out, concern threading his voice. "Be careful." She looked down, then back at him, and laughed, a clear, bright sound that echoed across the beach. "I've got this." When she returned, Miho reached out, brushing a stray leaf from her hair. Their eyes met, and the world seemed to pause, two hearts speaking in silence, caught between fear and hope. That night, beneath the vast sky, Iphigenia caught herself stealing glances at Miho. She saw the way the firelight danced in his eyes, how his lips curved when he thought she wasn't looking. But still, they said nothing. Fear of the unknown, of what the future might hold, held their confessions at bay. Yet, even without words, something tender was growing, something neither of them had expected on this island of survival and solitude. Days folded into each other in a gentle rhythm, the island's beauty an endless backdrop to Iphigenia and Miho's growing companionship. They shared laughter and stories, learning each other's rhythms, the cadence of their breaths, the way smiles would quietly bloom in the corner of their eyes. Miho found himself watching Iphigenia with a tenderness that surprised him. Every small gesture, every soft word, drew him closer, weaving a quiet longing into his heart. One afternoon, as the sun climbed high, Iphigenia ventured deeper into the island's lush greenery, her bare feet pressing softly against the warm earth. She was gathering wild herbs Miho had pointed out earlier, hoping to add their healing properties to their sparse meals. The air was thick with the scent of damp leaves and blooming flowers, a peaceful moment, until a sudden, sharp sting pierced her ankle. She gasped, stumbling back, her hand flying to the spot where a dark red welt already began to rise. The island's hidden dangers had revealed themselves in the form of a venomous insect, something swift and silent but deadly. Pain surged through her leg like fire, spreading rapidly, the swelling growing with alarming speed. Ifunania's breath hitched as dizziness swirled at the edges of her vision. She tried to steady herself, but collapsed against a nearby tree, the world tilting dangerously. Miho, returning with a bundle of palm fronds, noticed her faltering figure and rushed over without hesitation. Ifunania. His voice was sharp with concern as he knelt beside her, eyes scanning the swollen bite. Her face was pale, sweat beading at her hairline despite the heat. She tried to speak, but only a soft whimper escaped. Without a word, Miho carefully lifted her into his arms. The strength in his hands was gentle but unwavering. Ifunania's heart fluttered painfully, both from the sting in her leg and from the closeness, the way his warmth seeped through her soaked clothes. They moved slowly back toward their shelter. Each step was heavy with the weight of her pain, but Miho's steady presence was a lifeline. He talked softly, his voice low and soothing, words she didn't fully hear but found comfort in anyway. Once seated on the soft sand beneath the shelter's shade, Miho began tending to the bite. He had learned basic first aid from his years at sea, but had never cared for anyone so vulnerable before. Ifunania gritted her teeth as the swelling pulsed with sharp, burning agony. Tears threatened to spill, not just from the pain, but from the terrifying reality of her fragility in this wild place. But even in her pain, she reached out, clasping Miho's hands tightly between her own. Her fingers trembled, but her voice was steady and soft as she prayed, whispering words of faith, asking for healing, for strength, for protection. The quiet reverence in her tone echoed across the stillness of the island, a fragile beacon in the uncertainty. Miho's eyes never left her face. In that moment, he saw not just the woman beside him, but the fierce light of her spirit unbroken even as her body betrayed her. His heart ached with something deep and pure, a protective urge that went beyond simple survival. Carefully, he wiped the sweat from her brow, his thumb brushing gently across her skin. "You're strong," he said quietly, voice thick with emotion. "We'll get through this. Together." Ifunania managed a weak smile, squeezing his hands again. In her vulnerability, she found unexpected strength not just from her faith, but from the man who refused to leave her side. As evening fell, Miho built a small fire, warming water to cleanse the wound. He stayed close, offering sips of water, murmuring reassurances, his every movement filled with tender care. When Ifunania's eyelids grew heavy from exhaustion, he adjusted her gently against his chest, steadying her with quiet warmth. That night, beneath the stars that had witnessed their growing bond, Miho lay awake, his fingers still intertwined with Ifunania's. He realized the depth of his feelings, a fierce protectiveness mixed with a longing to be near her always. For Ifunania, the pain had drawn her closer to him, not just physically but in heart and soul. She leaned into the strength he offered, their silence speaking volumes in the darkness. The next day dawned with a heavy stillness. Ifunania awoke with a sharp, gnawing pain radiating from the bite on her ankle, far worse than the day before. Each movement sent fresh waves of agony coursing through her body. She tried to steady her breath, but the pain was relentless. A burning, swelling torment that made even the simplest motion unbearable. She lay on the sandy floor of their shelter, eyes squeezed shut, teeth clenched as a low groan escaped her lips. Miho, sitting nearby, watched with a tightening heart. "I'm sorry," she whispered through clenched teeth, voice strained and fragile. "I don't mean to, it's just..." Her words faltered, the pain overwhelming the strength she'd tried so hard to hold onto. Miho's hands hovered, then gently reached for hers. "It's okay," he said softly, voice thick with concern. "You don't have to apologize." Despite his best efforts, cooling the swelling with damp leaves, applying the herbal poultices he'd carefully prepared, nothing seemed to ease her suffering. Iphigenia's body was becoming more swollen, her skin flushed and slick with sweat, her breaths shallow and uneven. Tears finally slipped down her cheeks, unbidden but inevitable, as the pain shattered the fragile calm she'd maintained. She lay back, exhausted and vulnerable, the tears mixing with the sand beneath her. Miho's heart broke at the sight. Here was this strong, faithful woman, so full of resilience and light, now laid low by the island's cruel sting. But he didn't flinch. He squeezed her hand gently, anchoring her in the midst of the storm. "We'll get through this," he whispered, his voice steady though his own chest tightened. "You're not alone." Night came cloaked in darkness and chill, and Iphigenia began to shiver violently. Her body trembled uncontrollably, the fever burning beneath her skin. Miho gathered large palm leaves, carefully wrapping them around her to trap warmth, and built a fire whose flickering glow pushed back the cold. He stayed close, never leaving her side, watching as she drifted in and out of sleep. Even in rest, a faint, pained crease marred her brow. Yet when she stirred and smiled slightly, fragile, fleeting, he caught a glimpse of the strength still flickering inside her. Those days blurred into one another, filled with the weight of pain and the tenderness of care. Miho found himself drawn in ways he hadn't expected, his compassion deepening into something more profound. He saw not just a woman in pain, but the core of her spirit, brave, kind, and filled with a quiet grace. Each time she reached for his hand, each whispered prayer she offered despite the agony, wove a silent thread between their hearts. He tried to name the feeling swelling inside him. Was it love? Something tender and fierce that stirred in his chest whenever she looked at him with trust and vulnerability. The island had brought them together in survival, but it was these quiet, raw moments of pain, of care, of faith that were drawing their souls closer. And Miho knew, deep down, that whatever the future held, this bond was something rare and precious, growing stronger with each passing day. A week had passed since the night of fever and pain, and slowly but surely, Iphigenia was regaining her strength. Her swollen ankle was now nearly healed, and though she moved cautiously, she was eager to help with the daily tasks once again. Miho watched her closely, a mixture of relief and admiration swelling in his chest. There was something different about her now. Maybe it was the resilience shining brighter in her eyes, or perhaps it was Miho's own heart shifting. Every small smile, every careful step she took seemed to make her glow with a new kind of light. To him, Iphigenia had become radiant, like the island's own wildflower that had weathered the storm and bloomed stronger. They worked side by side, gathering food and reinforcing their shelter, but it was in the quiet moments when their connection deepened the most. Often, as night draped the sky in velvet black, they would lie flat on the warm sand, side by side, gazing up at the countless stars twinkling above. Iphigenia's voice would soften in the stillness, painting pictures with words of her hometown. A small, bustling place filled with vibrant colors, music, and the scent of blooming flowers after rain. She spoke of the winding streets, the laughter of children playing under the sun, and the way the market would come alive with spices and fresh fruits. Miho listened, captivated not only by the images she conjured, but by the way her face would light up with each memory. Those stories, simple and pure, became treasures to him, fragments of her life he held close, making the vast island feel a little smaller, a little more like home. "You make it sound beautiful," he said one night, turning his head just enough to catch the glimmer in her eyes. Iphigenia smiled shyly. "It is. But I've never seen stars as bright as these." Her gaze lifted to the sky, then back to him, soft and sincere. Miho's heart fluttered. In those moments, the world around them faded, the hardship, the uncertainty, leaving only the quiet intimacy of two souls finding each other beneath a blanket of stars. And with every passing day, the feeling growing inside him became impossible to ignore, something deeper than care, something that whispered of a future neither of them had dared to imagine yet. As the days unfolded under the warm island sun, Iphigenia and Miho found moments of lightness that eased the weight of survival. The island's beauty, its turquoise waters, soft white sands, and gentle breeze seemed to invite them to play, to laugh, and to savor the fleeting joy amid uncertainty. One afternoon, after a long morning gathering fruits and fishing by the rocky shore, they decided to build a sand house near the low tide. With sand slipping through their fingers and waves teasing the shore, their hands often brushed as they worked side by side, shaping towers and walls with simple, childlike delight. "Looks like a palace fit for a queen," Miho teased, grinning as Iphigenia sculpted the tallest tower with care. She shot him a playful glare. "Only if you promise to be the loyal knight." Their laughter mingled with the sound of crashing waves, the island around them humming with life. The sun beat down, turning their skin golden, and the salty breeze carried their carefree voices far across the shore. Later, they ventured into the shallow water, dipping their toes and then wading deeper, the cool sea washing away the dust and sweat of the day. Iphigenia's laughter bubbled up as Miho splashed water her way, and soon they were chasing each other in the surf, their earlier weariness forgotten. At one point, Miho caught Iphigenia gently by the waist, steadying her against the gentle pull of the tide. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the playful energy stilled, replaced by a shy, electric awareness of the other. Iphigenia looked down, cheeks flushed, but the smile she gave him was warm and genuine. As the day faded, they settled on a rocky outcrop to watch the sunset, the sky ablaze with pinks and oranges reflected in the calm sea. The world seemed suspended in that perfect moment, peaceful, radiant, and full of possibility. It was in these moments that their playful sides often brought unexpected sparks. One evening, as they roasted freshly caught fish over their small fire, Iphigenia surprised Miho by grabbing a piece and, with a mischievous grin, gently pressed it to his lips. "Try this," she insisted, eyes twinkling. Miho blinked, caught off guard, but opened his mouth. The warm, smoky flavor was delicious, but it was her boldness, the light teasing in her voice, that made his heart flutter wildly. "You're impossible," he murmured, laughing softly but feeling a sudden, foolish blush creep up his neck. Iphigenia chuckled, nudging him playfully. "You needed to eat more. And it's more fun this way." His smile deepened, shy yet full of affection. Those moments, the laughter, the teasing, the gentle touches, were weaving a tender tapestry of feelings he was just beginning to understand. Even the awkwardness, the stammered words and quick glances, only made it all feel more real, more alive. Under the island's endless sky, with the sea whispering at their feet and the sun setting like a promise, Miho realized something profound. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was the start of something beautiful, fragile, and entirely theirs. The night wrapped the island in a gentle hush, the small shelter they had built glowing warmly in the flickering firelight. Inside, Iphigenia and Miho sat close, the world beyond their refuge feeling distant and unreal. After a few moments of light teasing and shared laughter, the kind that only comes from growing comfort and trust, Miho's expression grew softer, more serious. He shifted to face her fully, eyes reflecting the golden flames. "There's something I haven't told you," he began quietly, his voice low with the weight he had carried alone for too long. "Something from my childhood. It's not easy to share." Iphigenia reached out, her fingers lightly brushing his hand, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's okay, whatever it is." Miho nodded slowly, drawing courage from her calm assurance. He began to speak, his words slow, measured, revealing a piece of his past that few had ever seen. As a boy, Miho had been born into a life where his father, a strict and distant man, never showed him love. Expectations loomed large, and mistakes were met with silence or scorn. The loneliness of his youth had been a quiet ache, one that no amount of sea voyages or adventures could fully erase. He told her about a night when, after a harsh reprimand, he had sat alone by the docks, watching the moonlight ripple across the water, tears burning his cheeks. No one had come to comfort him, no warm hand to hold. It was the first time he understood how deeply a child could feel abandoned. Iphigenia listened, her gaze unwavering, her hand steady in his. When he paused, breathing heavy with the memory, she whispered again, "Everything will be fine." Then, almost as if the warmth of her words had soothed him both, Miho's eyes found hers, shining with a fragile hope. He looked at her and asked softly, "Iphigenia, have you ever had a moment like that? A heartbreak that still lingers from your childhood?" But as his question hung in the air, he noticed her eyelids growing heavy. Before he could hear her answer, she had drifted off, her breathing slow and steady, her hand still clutching his. He smiled quietly, the lines of worry softening on his face. Gently, he turned to his side, laying his hand over hers, a silent promise of protection and care. In that tender moment, as the fire flickered and the night wrapped around them, Miho whispered softly to himself, "A secret meant only for the darkness, I think. I'm falling for you." Iphigenia's peaceful sleep, her trust, and her faith wrapped around him like a warm blanket, easing the weight of his past. With a calm heart, Miho closed his eyes, letting the night hold them both in its quiet embrace. The following day, in the bright warmth of the island's noon, Iphigenia often rested beneath the broad shade of a palm branch, the sunlight filtering softly through the leaves and casting dancing shadows on her serene face. Miho found himself stealing glances at her whenever he thought she wasn't looking, the way her eyelashes fluttered as she blinked, the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she breathed. Those quiet moments, so simple and still, held a kind of magic he hadn't expected. At night, as the sky deepened to velvet black and they worked together to fashion the SOS signals in the sand, Miho would catch himself looking at Iphigenia with a tenderness that surprised him. There was something about the way she concentrated on their task, the soft curve of her lips when she smiled at a successful arrangement, that made his heart ache with quiet longing. Sometimes, after their work was done, they'd lie side by side under the endless stars, exchanging tired smiles before drifting to sleep, and Miho would keep his hand close to hers, as if the simple nearness was enough to hold on to hope. The small, silly moments between them became treasures. Like when they bumped into each other on the narrow path near the shore, Iphigenia teasing him with a quick joke about how he ought to watch where he was going, her laughter bubbling up and brightening the air. Miho, usually so composed, found himself laughing hard, the sound mixing with the crashing waves and the whisper of the wind. Those bursts of joy felt like lifelines, threads weaving them closer together. Evenings were perhaps the most tender of all. Watching the sun dip toward the horizon, painting the sky with brilliant hues of orange and pink, Miho hesitated, then reached for Iphigenia's hand. It was a small gesture, gentle but deliberate. For a moment, she tried to pull away, shy and unsure, but he caught her fingers softly, his voice calm but firm. "Just let it be," he said quietly, no rush, no pressure. Iphigenia's heart fluttered in that moment, confused but strangely comforted. She wasn't sure if this was friendship or something more, and part of her wasn't ready to admit it yet. But Miho's touch lingered like a promise, a green light flickering in the space between them. She wanted to believe, wanted to hope, even if she wasn't ready to name it aloud. Miho, meanwhile, silently sent those signals every day, hoping she'd understand that his feelings were deeper than companionship, that this island had sparked something neither of them expected. He watched her with a quiet devotion, cherishing every smile, every glance, every breath shared in the warmth of the island breeze. And in those soft moments, moments made of sunlight, laughter, and hesitant touches, Their hearts began to beat in time, weaving a story of love quietly unfolding beneath the endless sky. The evening air was warm and thick with the scent of salt and blooming flowers as Miho and Iphigenia sat close together on the soft sand. The sky above was a canvas of deep purples and scattered stars, the gentle sound of waves lapping nearby setting a quiet rhythm to their shared silence. Miho's heart was pounding in his chest. Tonight, he had finally gathered the courage to tell her everything, the feelings he had tried to hide, the hope he dared to hold on to. He took a slow breath, his eyes meeting hers as he began to speak, his voice low and steady. Iphigenia, there's something I've been meaning to tell you, something I feel every day we're here together. But before the words could fully leave his lips, Iphigenia suddenly laughed, her eyes sparkling with mischief. She reached out and playfully flicked a small pebble at him, breaking the moment into lightheartedness. You're too serious sometimes, Miho. You should lighten up, she teased, flashing that radiant smile that made his heart ache even more. Miho smiled sheepishly, the seriousness slipping away as he joined her laughter. But inside, a flicker of worry had already begun to grow. Was this the right moment, or was he just fooling himself? The distraction continued as Iphigenia's attention was caught by a flicker of movement near the bushes, a tiny crab scuttling sideways, its little claws waving as if inviting them to play. She sprang to her feet, excited and curious, completely forgetting the confession he was about to make. Miho watched her with a mixture of amusement and a growing ache, realizing once more that the perfect moment kept slipping away. Later, as the night deepened and they prepared to rest, Miho found himself stealing glances at Iphigenia. Their hands brushed, and he subtly held her fingers a moment longer, hoping she'd feel the warmth behind the touch. But she simply smiled, whispering, "Friends." That single word hit him harder than any storm. Friends. Only friends. Days passed with these quiet tensions weaving between them. Miho planned small moments to signal his feelings, lingering looks, gentle touches, shared stories spoken just a little more softly. Once, he carefully arranged a small bouquet of wildflowers beside her pillow, hoping she'd see it as a sign. She laughed brightly, teasing him for being sentimental, joking, "Is this your secret way of saying I'm your queen of the island?" Miho's chest tightened. She was close, so close, yet somehow miles away from understanding. When he tried to hold her hand during their walks along the shore, she would pull back, giggling, "You're such a softie, Miho." And in her teasing, Miho heard the echo of a hope and a heartbreak all at once. One afternoon, while building a small shelter from palm fronds, Iphigenia bumped into him unexpectedly and grinned, "Careful, sailor. Watch where you're going, or I'll make you carry me." She laughed, her eyes bright, and Miho laughed too, but beneath it all, his heart was quietly pleading. Maybe I need to be clearer, he thought. Maybe my signals aren't bright enough for her to see. Yet every time Iphigenia's laughter filled the air, every time her hand brushed his, every shared glance held longer than necessary, Miho's hope flickered stronger. Even if she misread the signs, even if she thought it was just friendship, he couldn't stop loving her. Not here, not now, not ever. And so, beneath the endless sky of that island, Miho waited. For the right moment. For Iphigenia to see the love that had quietly, beautifully grown between them, a love that was real, deep, and worth every silent hope and every stolen glance. The night air was thick with quiet tension as Miho sat just outside their small shelter, the soft murmur of waves crashing against the shore beneath a canopy of stars. His fingers absent-mindedly rolled a cluster of delicate wildflowers into a makeshift bracelet, the petals soft against his skin. With a quiet determination, he approached Iphigenia, who was sitting nearby, humming softly to herself as she inspected a handful of seashells. Without much ceremony, he slipped the fragile bracelet onto her wrist and, looking her in the eyes, said softly, "I like you." Iphigenia looked down at the flowers, then smiled brightly, clearly misunderstanding him. You mean you like it? I like it too. It's beautiful, Miho. You're so thoughtful. He returned her smile, but it was a small, sad smile, one tinged with frustration. He simply nodded, then quietly walked away, settling down a few meters off with his back to the sea. With a small stone in hand, he began tossing pebble after pebble into the waves, each plunk echoing a hollow ache inside him. His gaze drifted toward the SOS sign they had painstakingly built from stones, a desperate plea for rescue, but also a reminder that this strange, beautiful island was no home. The thought of leaving, and leaving without ever telling Iphigenia how deeply he felt, gnawed at him relentlessly. The next evening, as they lay together in the shelter, the dim firelight flickering softly across their faces, Miho made up his mind. This time, there would be no interruptions. He turned toward her, his voice low and earnest. Iphigenia, I need you to know something. These past months, surviving here with you, it's changed me. I never thought I could feel like this about someone, about you. I tried to tell you before, but something always stopped me. Maybe I was afraid, or maybe the moment just wasn't right. But I want you to understand, I like you. I really like and admire you. More than just friendship. You're the light that's kept me going through this difficult past weeks and every other day here. And no matter what happens after we leave this island, I need you to know this is real. His words spilled out, raw and tender, carrying every beat of his aching heart. But as the silence settled around him, he realized she wasn't listening. Iphigenia's breathing was soft and steady. She had already slipped into sleep, her hand loosely resting on his arm. Frustration bubbled inside Miho, simmering dangerously close to anger. His heart clenched painfully at the timing, at the missed chance again. In a sudden impulse, barely able to contain himself, he flicked a gentle finger at her face, the smallest motion, but enough to make her stir lightly in her sleep. He sighed, leaning back and closing his eyes. Why now, Iphigenia? He whispered to the night. But even in his frustration, there was no bitterness, only a longing so deep it left him breathless. Tonight, like every night, he would wait, hoping that one day she would hear the words meant just for her. 2 days later, the sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in molten golds and soft purples, casting long shadows over the island's shore. Miho and Iphigenia sat side by side on the warm sand, their shoulders barely touching, but close enough to feel the gentle brush of skin against skin. The air was thick with the scent of salt and wildflowers, the peaceful sounds of waves rolling in and out creating a quiet symphony around them. Miho's heart hammered in his chest, louder than the ocean's roar. Tonight was the night. The moment he had agonized over for weeks, maybe months, had finally come into reach. He swallowed hard, gathering every ounce of courage as he turned to look at her face, glowing softly in the fading light. Iphigenia, he began, voice trembling, raw and honest. I can't keep this inside anymore. I've tried to hide it, tried to tell myself it's just friendship, but it's not. I love you. More than I ever thought possible. Every moment with you, the laughter, the silence, the way you make me feel alive when everything else seems lost, it's changed me. I'm scared sometimes, scared I might lose you, but I can't keep pretending that I don't want to be more than just a friend. His eyes glistened with unshed tears as he spoke, the weight of his truth pressing into the space between them. You've been sending me mixed signals for so long, pretending not to see what's right in front of you. Please, don't do that anymore. I'm here and I'm yours if you'll have me. Iphigenia's breath caught, her eyes wide, shimmering with a mixture of surprise and something deeper, something tender and fragile, like a bloom unfolding in slow motion. She looked at him, truly looked, as if the whole world had narrowed down to that one moment, that one confession. The silence stretched, thick and electric, before Miho leaned in, the distance between them collapsing. But instead of meeting his lips, Iphigenia wrapped her arms tightly around him, burying her face in his chest. But Iphigenia gently placed her hand on his chest, stopping him. Instead of a kiss, she wrapped her arms around him in a warm, steady hug, burying her face in his chest. There was a brief, tender awkwardness, the kind that follows a first honest confession, but it was beautiful in its sincerity. Miho rested his head lightly against hers, heart pounding, feeling the steady rhythm of her breath. Her voice was barely above a whisper, trembling with emotion. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for all the times you tried to tell me, and I got distracted or didn't realize. I never meant to hurt you." Miho held her close, the ache in his chest melting into warmth. In that embrace, he felt something finally settle, a quiet certainty that this was real, that the love he had longed for was being returned, even if cautiously. "I've waited for this," he murmured against her hair. "I've waited for you." They stayed like that as the last light of day faded, stars beginning to glitter overhead like tiny promises. Just days later, the distant roar of a helicopter broke the island's peaceful silence. Rescue had come. As they climbed aboard, the swirling emotions inside Miho felt overwhelming: joy, relief, and a deep gratitude. He glanced at Iphigenia, her hand slipping into his, her smile radiant in the bright cabin light. For the first time in a long time, he felt the author of the universe had written his story better than he ever dared imagine. And Iphigenia, heart full, knew she was leaving not just an island, but stepping into a future, one shared with a man who loved her with every part of his being. As the helicopter soared higher above the shimmering ocean, Miho and Iphigenia sat side by side, their fingers intertwined, hearts beating in quiet harmony. The island, with all its trials and tender moments, grew smaller beneath them, a beautiful chapter now behind them, but never forgotten. In that shared silence, both felt it deeply. This new love they had found was no fleeting spark born out of circumstance. It was a flame kindled through hardship, laughter, and unwavering support. A love strong enough to carry them beyond the shores of the island, into whatever future awaited. Miho glanced at Iphigenia, her eyes reflecting the endless sky, and smiled softly, certain that together they could build something lasting, something beautiful and true. And Iphigenia, with faith steady in her heart, whispered a silent prayer of gratitude for the journey that had brought them to this moment, hopeful and open to the promise of all the days yet to come. Love, they realized, could bloom in the most unexpected places, wild and untamed like the island itself, transforming lives in ways no one could predict. It was in those moments of vulnerability and trust that lasting bonds were forged, stronger than the fiercest storm or the longest wait. And as they looked ahead, hand in hand, Miho and Iphigenia knew their love was one such bond, ready to carry them forward, wherever life would lead. Their story was just beginning. A story of love that could, and would, grow far beyond the island, into a future bright with possibility.